talk about one of the least talked about but critical issues in healthcare, equipment maintenance. When an MRI or CT scanner goes down, there are all kinds of issues that ensue. Patient care stalls, you have quality issues, staff get stressed, providers get upset, and ultimately, millions of dollars of revenue are lost. Today, I am blessed to have Danny Mobley, the CEO and co-founder of Downtime Trace, in the studio. Downtime Trace is a company that's reimagining equipment repair and doing it in a way that really is shifting and changing the marketplace model. Think of it as Uber for the gig economy of equipment maintenance. Danny, welcome to the studio.
Thanks, Stephanie. That's a great intro. I really appreciate our friendship and getting to know you over the past many months. We did a podcast together a few months ago, and it was a great opportunity to get to know you better. And we had dinner before, and I'm really, really happy to be here with you. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm so happy to have you join us because with Downtime Trace, there's so much that can happen, and providers can submit the request to get committed beds and choose the options. And we're going to talk all about that. But before we get started, Danny, if you can share a little bit about your background, with the audience. I know that we both share the fact that our first careers did not begin in healthcare, and I'd love for them to understand a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I mean, it's probably boring to the rest of the world, but I was meant to be a cop. I thought early on, growing up, that I was going to follow my dad's footsteps. He was a police officer in Oklahoma City, and I actually got the opportunity to live my dream, I would call it, 'cause that's what it was. At 21 years old, I graduated from the academy in New Orleans. I became a New Orleans Police Department police officer. And it was quite an experience. And I was really young, and they gave me a gun and a badge and a car, and they let me go out and arrest people. And they had to be crazy for that. I mean, I'll just say that. It just circumstances turned out where I had to move back to Oklahoma. My daughter was being born. My wife at the time was not cool with living in New Orleans and having me getting shot at and running around chasing and having fun. She was okay with the fun part, but not the way I was trying to have fun back then. So I needed a job, and it was going to be a while until I could get on with the Oklahoma City Police Department, where my dad was the lieutenant, right? And those things take a while. Just for those that don't know, in the police world, there's background checks, there's waiting until academy classes come out, which sometimes don't happen for years between academy classes. So they only really hire at certain points, and then the hiring process is really long and tedious. So I had to settle in, get a job, and luckily I had a friend through a friend who was in the medical equipment rental space at a company called UHS, Universal Hospital Services, and I got hired on as the delivery driver. I was thankful, I was grateful at the time to have the job, but it was a trip going from having authority to sweeping floors and having a boss yell at you for little things. And luckily I did pretty good at it. I really got to know the equipment. I got to know how to clean it, which sounds a little bit wonky, but really kind of is important if you think about it. I learned how to test it. I learned how to deliver it. And then I learned the environment of healthcare, because the people I drop the equipment off to, sometimes it's a ventilator in the middle of the night. Sometimes it's an IV pump in the middle of the day. Like, I got to see all of it. And I learned a lot. And so after about a year of doing the delivery thing and wearing a tie to work, I was kind of an overachiever, but I was 23, and that's what I learned as a young person is, overachieve and you might get somewhere. I don't know where I got that, but it worked. So I had them all fooled, right? And then they promoted me to sales in Eastern Oklahoma, this new territory. I like to deem it like a throwaway territory for a company that size, where they could put me out there, and if I do good, great. There's ceiling that's great, but if I fail, it's not going to harm anything either. So, but I loved it. I loved the freedom. They gave me a car, it was a minivan, and I didn't have to pay for the minivan, which is a great, when I'm 23, 24, and I was used to making $30,000, $40,000 a year. My first year in sales, I made 80, and they gave me a car on top of it. So it was a big deal, a big deal for my family. And, I don't know. So I was living up in Tulsa, running around, and I was motivated every day to go out, and I would talk to people at the rural hospitals, especially because the CEOs and CFOs, for some reason in Eastern Oklahoma, they let me in the door and they talked to me and they showed me their world. And some of them, like Dennis and Xavier and Dave, and Randy, they poured into me, and these guys are instrumental in what I've become as far as my success. I feel like I've had a lot of success, but it started with them pouring into me. And so from there, the company that brought me along, UHS, I left and started my own thing at 27. I co-founded a company, and it's similar to what we're doing at Downtime Trace, but we didn't have the technology. We didn't have the app or the tech back then, right? But it was very similar where whenever they had a piece of equipment break, they only had one phone call, and we would take care of everything behind the scenes for like the radiology technologist or the lab manager or the CNO or the clinician on the floors. They just had the one phone call, and then our administrative people in the background using our database and all of our tools like that I built. Like we would just call out and make sure that the service got to them and that it was all taken care of. I sold out of that company early, like 31 years old, went back into corporate America, stayed in the medical equipment service world, and then just over the years, my brother, who's also happened to be in the same industry, I got him involved, early on. He started off as delivery driver as well, but then went the ops route and ops management from there. So he and I just had some ideas over the years, but one idea just kept popping back up. We kept thinking, man, our industry is antiquated. The way we do stuff is just really kind of tough on the customers and tough on the service providers. So like, what if we had this Uber, idea? And anyway, it was really his idea. He was in the mix, and this is crazy, but he was an HTM director or biomed director at a local hospital in Oklahoma. And this is after years and years of managing huge operations across the country for big manufacturers. He finally, settled back home, and he was delivering pizzas at night just to make ends meet while also having this biomed job. And one night, his hospital called out for service on a sterilizer, and it was something he could have done. Right, he had the skill set, but they kind of bypassed the system and called the manufacturer and spent thousands and had a bad experience in that case. Not always bad with the OEMs, right? But had a bad experience. And Jason's like, he's like, wow, if they would have only known I was available and slinging pizzas, right? And I could have gotten out there to do that service, and they could have paid me a couple $100 instead of the thousands that they paid. That would have been something, So we just for 5 years, we tossed this idea around, and then Stephanie, finally, I made some money. I made huge commissions and had success in the company that I was working for. And I had the confidence, and I was like, let's do it. I quit the corporate executive thing and threw myself out there, and my brother quit his job and my mom quit her job, and like a couple of friends, a couple of people invested. And that's how I'm here today. And just a new CEO trying to figure it out about 2 years later, but we're having success, and it's a blast.
It's amazing. Your brother's example is such the perfect, I'd say, scenario and story, Danny, of a situation where there's a problem and all of a sudden you came up with the fact that we need a better way and a better solution for this in healthcare, and a way that we can connect the technicians, which was your brother at that time doing a job, pizza as a second income, with the actual rural market and other markets that actually need the support. So I love that example. And you touched upon a couple of things I do want to come back to before we move on, is the mentors and the coaches that poured into you and how important they were early on, especially in a rural healthcare experience. I think, sometimes we underestimate the value of the people that cross our paths in our careers. And that's so important to where you are today, because without those mentors and coaches, you never would have developed. And you also shared that you were always dressing the part, and that you don't know what was wrong with you at the age of 23, but you were putting the suit on. And I just want to share that it's so important for us to always be looking at the next level. And, what do I need, or who do I need to become to move into the next level of entrepreneurship or my company or healthcare? And you touched upon that so eloquently. So I did want to circle back to that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It was instinctual for me to do that, but I ultimately knew the environment that I wanted to be in, and I knew how they looked, and I knew how they talked, and I've heard it said about sales that you need to be a psychologist and an actor, and so I found a lot of truth in that. But adapting to your environment as sort of an actor, if you will, is also very important. If you can relate with the people and build relationships, you're not acting for very long, because they turn into genuine relationships pretty quickly, But I just found myself listening and being open, and and open to suggestion, right? Like I knew I didn't know enough. I knew very little, and whatever time they were willing to give me, I was just always gung ho to. I would leave my house at 5 o'clock in the morning to have a 20-minute period of time with a CEO of a hospital that's 2 or 3 hours away, and that would be my morning that day. And I would stop at other rural hospitals along the way, do simple things like just stop in and be persistent, but not. So I'll say this word, but not a douchebag, right? Like there's all these things you figure out along the way, and but I wouldn't have had the ability to glean those things had somebody not given me feedback and taken the time to talk to me. And so that thing that they did was give me time, and my openness I think mattered at some level. And there's more to it, I'm sure, but in my eyes at the time, I was just being given this gift by good people.
I appreciate you sharing that. It's so important. I did want to touch upon that before we, work to really quantify how important this situation is to rural hospitals and quite frankly all hospitals in general. When equipment goes down, it doesn't just impact that department, it impacts the entire healthcare organization, hospital, the providers, the patients, the quality. It delays care, it diverts potential procedures coming to your organization. So can you talk and quantify a little bit about when equipment goes down, even, and let's just talk about a critical access hospital first, but then in a tertiary facility, what happens? What's the impact?
Well, I'll tell you the first thing that happens to the operators of the equipment, the radiology technologists or the lab technicians or the clinicians, is their anxiety spikes. It's a disruption in their care, and that's in and of itself a really, I think, traumatic sort of set of circumstances. So you start off getting into this, realm of anxiety, but then it's really clunky after that, right? So they have anxiety because they know how hard it's going to be to get out of whatever situation they found themselves in with a repair need or whatever it is going on with their equipment that's been so disruptive. They care about the patients. What do they got to do with the patients that are on the table or the patients that need, their test results? And so that actually is very true. I mean, this is all humanistic stuff, right? And so we think about that, and then the finances. That's the lagging indicators. Is what's the impact financially? And in my world, having done enough studies and seen enough data, the hospitals are going to lose, like you said, a lot of the staff satisfaction, patient satisfaction, the throughput. I mean, there's a lot of data for that, but financially, $6,000 to $8,000 per minute. If you have like the high end imaging equipment break, that's what hospitals are losing. 6 to 8 thousand per minute. I mean, I did the math, and it's going to be somewhere around $480,000 per hour. And a lot of these situations don't get fixed in an hour; they get fixed in days. So you just multiply that; it's exponential. The compounding effect of downtime, and so you're getting less happy patients. Your staff is more and more anxiety ridden, more stressed, and then eventually frustrated. The people all through the chain who are waiting, clinicians, that are waiting for test results, or patients that are waiting for treatment. And it's just this profound effect. And you're right. I don't think people really think about that or talk about it, enough, at least in my experience. And so, yeah, we're first thing we have to do is kind of talk about it and figure out why this is important and why there's a need. And trust me, when I'm selling to outside investors and trying to raise money, I have to do my part to lay that groundwork so that the general public can understand, because it's not intuitive. Nobody's sitting around thinking about how medical equipment being down will affect healthcare.
Yeah, $480,000 per hour is such a large number. And, to your point, Danny, I don't believe that, the C-suite or investors or, anyone's really thinking about that whenever the equipment goes down. They're only seeing how much it costs on the other side when they have to repair it. But if you think about the cost of that, it's large. And, at Altius, we focus on productivity, and there are times where equipment goes down in critical access hospitals or rural markets for, 3 or 4 days, and we can see the profound impact on not only their productivity, but their financial statements just from that situation, not to mention the unintended consequences that you don't see, like the care issues that come through. So let's touch upon what's the current system, what's broken, how are the contracts currently handled so we can set the stage for the great solution you have.
Yeah, no. So I would say that service contracts are something that anybody in healthcare is going to know about. And you also think about your car, from the personal, for your personal lives. You can get extended warranties. So when I say service contract, just kind of think maybe extended warranty on your car or a home warranty. There's all sorts of different warranties out there that I would kind of say we have warranties slash service contracts. I use those synonymously, right? But a large portion of the inventory of medical equipment throughout the country, especially the high end stuff, lab equipment, imaging equipment, is covered by some sort of full service contract, meaning for the hospitals, their goal is to have one budgetable number, right? Say for a CT, this is probably a pretty close example, or an MRI machine, they're going to spend between $80 and $100,000 per year for a full service contract. And what they anticipate is that if they sign this contract with this one vendor, usually the manufacturer, they make up, probably 40 or 50% of the service contracts are with the manufacturer, maybe larger than that. It's one company that you're committing yourself to, but for the hospitals, they're going to pay one number. They know they're not going to have to pay over that amount, right? And that contract will cover most of the things on the piece of equipment from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, in most circumstances. So if the piece of equipment goes down in the middle of the night, which, healthcare being a 24/7 business, that happens, or on the weekends or holidays, you're gonna have to pay extra for that, that service event if it happens to happen outside of the coverage hours. Plus, if like the electricity blows, like you have a lightning strike or a spike, that's not covered by these full service contracts. So when hospitals think that they're getting full service, they're really getting a level of service, but it's not full. Like that's, to me, it's a marketing thing that the industry's done over the years, is use this term full service, but it's not even close in some cases to being full service. There's a lot more expenses that are incurred. And the other thing that's happening is the hospitals are just contracting with one vendor. So they're saying that I'm gonna use you for everything, just one entity. And that's troublesome because there's already few options to choose from in our industry. There's not a ton or a ton of service providers out there, a ton of service technicians. The pool is shrinking, just like it is with in your personal life, just like it is with HVAC or plumbers or tradespeople, right? Like it's the same thing in our industry. So like the fact that you're going to kind of say I'm going to sign a contract that commits me to one entity, they have trouble sourcing people just like everybody else, right? Even though they may be conglomerate manufacturers, they're having a really hard time keeping talent in their pipeline and keeping technicians available. And by the way, they make a pretty healthy bottom line. So they're trying to make money off of this thing, which is kind of counterintuitive to you having the best possible service. So keeping that in mind, that's the way that I'd say 50-60% of the hospitals cover their equipment is through that service contract. The rest of it, they're just kind of calling down a list of service providers as their equipment breaks. So in that moment, they're being super reactive, and they got a contact list in their phone most of the time, or they got a list from the hospital that's of technicians or service providers, companies, small companies, or even the manufacturer that have been vetted to do business with that hospital, right? But it takes about an hour and a half every time that they start making those phone calls to get one response of somebody saying, I can come out and work on your piece of equipment, right? So that's, trust me, it's when it happens to me, I'll still test it. I'll still sometimes have a friend call and say, hey, I got my piece of equipment now. Can you help me find somebody to work on this dialysis machine or this sterilizer, or whatever? And I go through that process. I start calling my friends and texting down my list, and it takes a good hour and a half to get a response of somebody that's saying, yeah, I can go out there and do the repair. And then the work starts. Then you got to start coordinating all that stuff. So there's a lot to it. I mean, there's a lot to what they do today, and it's super antiquated, and it doesn't allow the hospital to have the ability to track what the service providers are doing. It's just like you might, I don't know, just envision yourself at home, right? Without DoorDash, without having TaskRabbit or Angie's List or whatever. That's what you just call down a list in the yellow pages or Google or whatever. That's what these folks are doing in the hospitals whenever their anxiety spiked and they're, like trying to figure out what's going on. They're calling down a list of people trying to get somebody to answer them.
It brings back so many memories of calling random lists in yellow pages, and then you have to wait for the quotes to come in. And by the time you've actually, gone down the list, you receive the phone calls, you're weeks out sometimes to
Yep.
actually find that repair. So
Yeah.
definitely, an important change. And you talked about the fact that the equipment maintenance contracts probably only cover about 50% of the hospitals. And once they're signed into that, they're locked in. So it's only
Yep.
one provider, and you're stuck with whatever technicians they send your way, correct?
Yep. You're stuck with the technicians. You're stuck with that company, and like our whole vision was to connect the market with the options, right? And do that for every event, and make it as convenient as it is to get an Uber, right? And so like it's a far cry. Like what we're doing is a far cry from what's happening today. But there's so many inherent risks, and by the way, I'll mention this because we'll probably hit on it in a minute. But those contracts have what they call uptime guarantees. So these companies will provide through their contract terms these uptime guarantees. They'll say like, "Hey, look, we'll cover your equipment as long as it stays within these parameters of the contract. We'll have your equipment up 98% of the time, right? Meaning you're going to have less than 2% downtime." Well, it's hard to measure the way that they do it. It's kind of confusing, but that's immeasurable. And if they don't reach that, there's consequences. Like they would have to pay back money against their contract. They have to provide other services. And so I want to, we'll get into why that's going to matter in the future, but in our conversation here. But that's a big note right there.
Well, you just talked about the fact earlier, in this episode that it costs $480,000 per hour. So I'm thinking 2% downtime isn't a small number of cost.
No, you would think, but the way that they calculate it is not really using that data. It's using how much the customer is paying for the annual amount of the contract. That's the portion you get back. They're not going to reimburse you, a hospital or any customer, for what their actual loss is. They're only going to reimburse you for what you've paid into the contract. So yeah, it's already starting off like consequences being a lot lower than what the hospitals have as far as what they have to bear whenever there's a downtime. It's nowhere close. So yeah, it's an interesting topic, and I want to we'll definitely dive into how the app will help hospitals manage that situation. Given the fact that they have no tools today to hold them accountable to those contract terms, this app is going to be great for them. It already is proving out to save them a lot and get them what they at least they deserve in that contract between them and the company that they have a contract with.
So let's talk about that now. Why
Sure.
don't you walk us through it? I'm a hospital leader, in a hospital. Piece of my equipment just broke down, whether it's radiology equipment like an MRI or it's, laboratory equipment. What happens? I need the request. I need someone to come out and repair. What's the process that happens within Downtime Trace?
So when you get to that point, you've already had an account set up and your inventory is already loaded into our system, right? And we help with that. It's not as tedious as it seems. So by the time that you have a piece break, then it's already in there. So you're not having to type in all the serial numbers, makes, models, everything like that. So we do that proactively with the Downtime Trace app that they've got on their phone. It's a true app. It's through iOS or the Google store, right? So like you got that side taken care of, and it's normal. It's like what you do at home. Same sort of thing. You got an app on your phone, Downtime Trace. You press the button, opens up your app. You log in the way you normally log in with your face recognition or whatever it is that's on your phone, that technology that you have, and then you press a few buttons, and you enter a little bit of information, and you take a quick video of what you're experiencing, and you press this beautiful button called blast, and once you press the blast button, it like simulates the rocket ship. There's a lot of depth behind why we did it like that, but you're having a visual experience, so you can see that your blast has been sent, and where it goes, that blast is to all of the service provider options for that specific make and model, right? And that's very important that we did that because when we're piggybacking off of what works in society already, those successful apps, we learned a lot along the way with our focus groups and the panels that we convened, that people really like and enjoy the fact that they can visually see that something's happening, and they don't want a bunch of riffraff. They don't want people responding to them that don't really have any business responding, that aren't qualified to respond. So the algorithm in the app matches the piece of equipment that customer has to service providers that have the skill set, who've been vetted, who are competent to come in to work on that piece of equipment, and they get that blast, and then they get to give a bid, right? The bids that come back from the service providers have three really key points that will allow the customers to make a great choice with all of their options in front of them. And it's all on one screen, by the way. This is one of our current customers at Children's Hospital. The other day, he was really excited because it's the first time he got to experience it. And on one screen, he had 6 different bids to come do a preventative maintenance on his C-arm, right? And those 6 different bids had everything he needed, how much it was going to cost, when they could show up, and their star ratings and their reviews, right? So he knew some of the vendors who were on that list. He'd used them in the past, but there were a lot that were companies he didn't know about. So that star rating and review was a really important piece for him. If he's going to take a chance on somebody he doesn't know, it's going to be good to have some, really good data on their quality in any way that you can. But he has this sheet in front of him, like one screen, all of the bids lined up, stacked on top of each other. You can see them easily, and you can see the range of the pricing from like $280 to like $1,400, and that spectrum is pretty wide. And all 6 of them have different prices, and they have different philosophies on their approach on how they're going to do this. And you can dive into them, and you can see, like, if you press into one of the bids, you can see everything you want to about that company. It's like a LinkedIn profile stuff where you can kind of see the technician, you can see their skill set, their competencies, you can see the history of the company, you can see any, like, we do a handshake video too, which is like a 20-second clip. If you wanted to really see what this, get a feel for somebody, a company, you press that video handshake, and it's them talking on video to you to kind of give a synopsis of who they are and all that stuff. So it's pretty cool, right? But what this guy said to me, he said, look, it would have taken me hours to do this, and frankly, I don't think I would have ever gotten there, because typically he's like, I choose the first person that says I can be there and the lowest price. But now that I can see all the different prices, I didn't choose the lowest price because I had more data, good data. I chose somebody in the middle that I felt like and had experience with, and so it was a great experience for him. So he chose the right bid for him, and it got him connected immediately. That bid is now the service provider knows that they've won the bid. Then that's when the communication starts happening. We make all the service providers, in order for them to move forward in the process, they have to satisfy the screen that's in front of them, right? In the past, it's been all over the place with communication. It's been all over the place with service providers telling customers when they're on their way, or when they've arrived, or what they're planning to do. So the app captures all that and communicates it all to the customer via like in-app notifications and emails. It's documenting everything along the way, all the timestamps. So really exciting, innovation for the customers. And it's actually a relief. We've talked to a lot of the service providers. It's such a nice interface, visual interface for them, where they're used to using databases that they don't like. We did a lot of discussion with the service providers on that side about, how they want to use technology, how it can help them versus be considered like a burden, like they consider it today. And so it's just a different experience for both sides, but it so much mimics us riding the coattails of successful apps that exist in our personal lives. That's essentially all we've done, is make it like, you'd have DoorDash, and it steps, all the way through like DoorDash would, or like Domino's, or Uber. It's the same experience now brought to our little niche of medical equipment service. So that's the experience that we created for people. And so we're excited about that. And there's a lot of depth to it. So each one of those little features has lots of depth in how we got there and how it really works.
What I really appreciate about the process that, you took with Downtime Trace, and, your partners took with Downtime Trace, Danny, is that you took the best of all those environments and apps. You mentioned Domino's and Uber and Instacart, but you also infused some things into the process, that are relevant in today's environment when you're thinking about getting your car repaired, or you're dealing with, technicians that come to your house to repair heat, furnaces and air conditioners. You really made the best playbook within the app and pulled all of the best features of those together into a fascinating, I'd say, marketplace that really takes the best of the back. So similar to what Altius did, with productivity, we build upon what's working well within each of the different areas: benchmarking, action planning, reporting. Took the best of those, added to it, and then launched from there. And you took the best of all of these app environments, combine them together into a really fascinating bidding process that also has, some benefits to technicians and opportunities there too. And, one of the things I think is great about everything that you shared is that you really have a high level of trust that gets built into the process. You mentioned the example where, the CEO chose the technician and the company because he really liked the reviews and what it could see. So you add that trust before it even starts, but then you build on top of that additional qualities checks as well.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think, there certainly is a lot to it, but, again, if we kept it simple, we wouldn't be in existence had, society not accepted the way that they have these apps, and it's really refreshing, frankly, because we can adjust as we go. If there's a new trend that comes out, and I think the next one, frankly, is going to be voice, where, instead of pressing buttons, you're just going to be able to use your voice. And then the other thing, AI, we're already working on this as a module, is the decision making about who chooses the bid. We've had customers come to us and say, like, I don't really feel comfortable with my frontline staff, number one, blasting. So we had to create a save button to allow for the operator of the equipment to give the pertinent information about what's wrong with it, but then hit save and let one of their managers blast it out, right? Because sometimes, in their words, to our customers' words, you can just go and reboot the machine and you'll get that, where you need to go, and you can fix a lot on your own without having to blast out, right? So there's some sort of built-in accountability, if you will, oversight, that comes with talking about this with our customers. Like, how do you want to do it? How do you want us to set it up for you? That's all there. They can choose how they want to do it, but there's so much with the approvals internally. Like, you got different levels of people in these hospitals, and if it's a CEO making a decision, that's great, but oftentimes it's not. And what we didn't want to have happen is for executives, at a high level, to come back and question some of the biases that exist. Like, right. I got to say this: like, some middle managers have created relationships with these service providers over the years, and they might make a decision based off of a bias. We've seen that. It's just out there. It's human nature. It's okay. And so, but we're thinking, after talking to the high level, like executives in these organizations, it'd be nice to have an AI like option that says, based off of the data, your repair with all the options that have bid, this is the percentage wise, this is the best choice, right? And if they have to deviate from that, that's fine. But at least they will know, everybody will know that based off of the data, it's just data. Here's what the recommendation is for which bid to choose, So there's lots of cool stuff we get to do in the future. And I think it's like, to your point, just like listening and seeing how the markets are responding in our personal lives. And it's actually it's not bad work. That's kind of fun to go with trends and figure out how to, do what they're doing there and bring that stuff over, because we're audacious, Steph, but we want to have the best user interface experience in the world. That's what we want. We're in medical equipment. This is healthcare. This is big time. And, compared to, getting your pizza delivered, right? Like, there's a lot of really good user experiences happening there at that level that we've heard a lot of great stuff about. And that's not to diminish what they're doing at all. It's like, that's important to people and their experience. But this is healthcare. We want to make this the best possible user interface, so people can, have a better experience at work than they might at their actual personal lives. And we can save people money. There's a lot of important work to be done. So we think that the visual, verbal experience is going to be the wave of the future, and we just got to, stay in lockstep with what trends are happening, and that's exciting to us.
If you had to wave a magic wand and really think about where you hope Downtime traces 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what might be some of the areas and things that you're going to expand into that we haven't touched upon yet today?
Yeah, so we've already actually started exploring going outside of healthcare. We have this relationship through one of my investors with Amazon and their warehouses, right? And he's telling us all the time that, hey, your medical equipment situation is very similar to electrical contracting and plumbing and HVAC and all the other trades out there. So we don't see any boundaries here with moving outside of healthcare. We actually see a lot of ways where we can help, and not just commercial, but maybe eventually get into residential. But I go back to the actual advancements in technology and how having all this data coming into one place, like having right now, what doesn't exist in our world is one place to go for all the service providers, and having all those competencies for all these technicians in one spot, right? There's not a standard for that. There's not a standard for communication, and this is a big deal, because when you're a hospital and there's hundreds of service providers out there, the way it goes today is you have to learn every service provider's way of doing business, right? It's not fair to the hospital. It's also, on the flip side, not really fair to the service providers, because you've got thousands of different customers and they all do business differently too. So like we're creating a standard in a new language, frankly, with what we're striving for. But along the way, the things are just picking up because we're having to do these things. It's just to get our app to be successful, due course of business, you have to understand these things. And I'm just excited to see what we could do with that data and how we could, use it in all sorts of really good ways for both sides to help improve or grow the pool. But that gig technician idea is brand new to our industry. I mean, even though there's a gig economy out in the world right now and it's growing and getting stronger, as retirees are coming through over the next 5 years and our small pool of available technicians and companies, like to have options for them that maybe they don't go all the way into retirement. Maybe they just kind of step into retirement, dip their toe in, and through Downtime Trace, they can win jobs that they want. They can have flexibility. They can choose to work a weekend and pay a bill or go on vacation with the money that they make, right? And the fact that we pay within 3 days, that's a huge deal. That's something that never existed before. So we'll keep exploring ways to pay people faster. Maybe when they're on their way home, if we can get the approval from the customer that their job was done to their satisfaction, then you can pay these technicians on their way home like they're used to getting paid at Uber and Lyft, right? Like those are all things that I get really excited about. But we had to start with building, like we have this foundation, and we're there. Like it's exciting to know that we're there. This technology is working. The market's accepting it, and I feel like it's unlimited where we can go from here. It's just a matter of using our imaginations to kind of and listening, right, and adjusting and being willing to do those things. But yeah, it's a pretty wide open frontier for us.
Yeah, I would definitely agree, especially when you think about the other industries that could benefit from the technology that you've put together.
Yeah, no, I love that. And like, there's depth in all this stuff, right? I probably said that a bunch already, but that pay fast, what we call rapid pay, that was revolutionary. And the fact that we cover these folks, their insurance when they go out, right? That's another unique feature. And frankly, when we started, people said we couldn't accomplish what we wanted to with the gig workers because the insurance would get in the way. It's too expensive. But we found a great provider. It really wasn't as hard as people made me think it was going to be. But when you're, how it is, like when you're an entrepreneur, resilience it comes with the territory. You have to have it. And those are just small obstacles at the end of the day. But, insuring general liability, cyber, auto for these technicians that are going to go into these hospitals, you have to insure them at the level that the hospital needs. So you can't sacrifice that, and they can't afford the policies as an individual. They can't afford the parts. So we just knew, and because we knew we're going to have to come up with money to pay fast and to pay for parts and to pay for all the insurance. We set aside the money. I had to raise the money necessary. By the way, I've never raised money, so this is all a new world for me. But you got millions aside to do this. I think it makes both parties feel secure that they're paying one entity. Like, pay the app, don't pay directly to these different people. And you only pay one entity if you're a customer. If you're a hospital, you're paying the app, and we pay out, and we can pay fast, and we can pay attention to making sure that, some hospitals are really, I don't know, handcuffed is the right word, but they've got some challenges with deviating from how quickly they pay. And so this is just another option to make those technicians happier, to get the providers paid quickly. There's so much psychology to that we found, and it's a happier employee, it's a happier service technician that shows up on your site in a different frame of mind versus mundane work that they've done every day that are being forced to do at their regular jobs. It does provide a dynamic, and it's been interesting to watch the results as far as the star ratings and reviews coming from the customers about the attitudes and the behaviors of those technicians that are walking in. It's a different world.
Yeah, it definitely is. And, Downtime Trace is definitely disrupting the marketplace in so many different areas and creating some really strong competition in a segment of the market that really hasn't seen that before. And I really look forward to seeing where things are developing, in the future. Right now, I'm a CFO, I'm a CEO, maybe even I'm the director of equipment maintenance, and we've been operating in the old model. We've had our OEM equipment maintenance contracts forever. What's the one thing you would like me to know that's important about how Downtime Trace delivers value or cost? What should I know in order to help make the decision?
It's a big administrative burden on your organization to do it the way you're doing. And there's a lot of unknowns. There's no real good way to track right now. I mean, if you have made decisions to get into service contracts, that's the way it is, and it's the most common thing we deal with. So when we walk in to a situation, we just anticipate that there's going to be at least half of the equipment covered by these full service contracts, but there's no way for the hospitals to track them, right? And if you can't track the performance of those contracts and those service providers, then you're really at their mercy. And when you've had instances, and most everybody I talk to, I'd say about 100%, have had situations where they haven't been able to get service as fast as they thought they should, and they had no other recourse, right? So when you have service contracts, the app is great. It's simple. It allows you to press a button, but it holds accountable those service providers to those service contracts. So you don't have to really wait to use this. But we had some very specific example, and I tell this to everybody when I meet them for the first time. Our customer, a children's hospital that just started utilizing us a few months ago, they've asked us to now take on their dialysis machines, where they've been with the manufacturer for years and they've gotten poor service. They paid a lot of money and they want options. They want a way to get out. Well, as long as there's the service providers on the app, then they put the dialysis machines under the app's management. They can make the service provider under contract capitulate to the things that are important for tracking purposes. But their goal is to get out of that contract. And so they want to track the data to see how many service events compared to how much they're paying. And it just becomes a math problem at that point for a CFO, right? Where you're saying, well, you guys came out 4 times over the past 2 years, yet we paid you $30,000. And by the way, you were late on 2 of them getting here. You didn't fulfill the contractual obligations. But if we were to use this app, I wouldn't have to pay the monthly premium for that service contract. I would still have the same 4 service events, right? And we believe that we're going to have better optionality when we have a piece of equipment go down. So yeah, in that case, it's a no-brainer. Start using the app to track the service contracts you have, and then use that data to make good decisions going forward. If you want to stay with the service contract, absolutely support that, but you still want to hold them accountable, right? But why not have optionality to move out of that service contract using real data that you've tracked over from now until the contract ends at least. And these hospitals, especially this children's hospital, said, no, I'm not going to re-sign that dialysis service contract with that dialysis company. It doesn't make sense for us. We know already. We didn't need the tracking. We know already we don't want to do that. But your app just provided options for us that we didn't know that existed in a way that we can pay for it as we go. And by the way, it doesn't cost the hospital anything. It's like it's not their expense to use the app. It's free. So like, how do you? I don't know. Once you go through all the depths that we went through, and then you hear that it's free, that's kind of a trip.
Danny, I love that, and it really makes the decision in my mind automatic, right? Like, why would I not want to take this step to really understand how I can reframe my equipment maintenance contracts, and in certain cases where I'm not getting the service that I need, be able to competitively bid against that? It's such a solvable problem, and it really creates, I think, a completely new environment. And I, as the hospital CEO, CFO, I don't have to wait anymore. So I think platforms like Downtime Trace and what you're doing are going to help create an entirely different level of service within the industry, not just in healthcare, but across everywhere. And at the end of the day, it's going to be the communities, the patients, the staff, the providers, the quality that benefits the most. So this has been such a great conversation, Danny. And, if there's someone that really resonated with the message, they're looking for a different solution, where would you recommend they go to actually find you?
I'm easy to find, and right now, given where our company is, I'm happy to talk to anybody. We've got a great team of people. You can always find me at Danny Mobley on LinkedIn. That's Downtime Trace is on LinkedIn. Downtimetrace.com is our website, and our website's actually functional too. So, whenever you come to the website, there's information there, but it's also, if you chose to use the technology on the web instead of using it on your phone, you can do that too. It's a desktop, sort of version. And so you get there through the web. And so our website's actually functional. It turns into a sign-in situation where you can actually dive into our technology. So yeah, downtimetrace.com, Danny Mobley, Downtime Trace on LinkedIn, YouTube. We've got videos up that are instructional videos, and we got a bunch of tutorials and stuff up there too. But I think any of those places are going to be easy to find me. I promise. And then you can't go wrong with just tapping me, or if there's contact us forms on Downtime Trace too. So yeah, it'll be pretty easy to get a hold of me.
Thank you so much for taking time today to share with the audience the innovation that you've created and the transparency around equipment maintenance, and also to share, some personal stories about hospitals, and healthcare organizations where you're already making a difference, and sharing that, healthcare can get back online faster and you don't have to settle for contracts that you've been locked into for a long time. Your productivity is not just about the benchmark, not just about your personnel and staffing and scheduling. It's also about making sure that your equipment's working correctly every single day and making sure that you have the systems in place to repair it if it's not. So, Danny, is there anything else you want to share with the audience before we conclude?
No, I just think, Stephanie, this is a great forum, and I totally appreciate the opportunity. I do want to make it pretty clear that this is great conversation. I don't ever get a chance to do this, to talk about the business like this. It's my opportunity comes in little snippets of conversations with people I've had relationships for years, and so to be able to talk in depth about how this works is refreshing for me. I hope it doesn't come off as salesy. And one of the things I put out there is, forgive if you think this is a bad word, but I don't want to be a douchebag sales guy. I've always been afraid of that. So to give me a forum to kind of talk about my passion and everything, I really appreciate this. I feel safe in this forum with you in this environment, and it's been nice to kind of get this off my chest a little bit and be able to talk about it so freely. You're really great about giving me the opportunity to say what I think is important, but hopefully people will judge on their own what's important to them, and they got enough information. There's a lot of it out there. It goes deep in a lot of places. So this is a great opportunity for me to kind of dive in.
Oh, you're welcome, Danny. And I have so much gratitude, for our friendship and relationship, and appreciate everything that you shared today. And I really have, a lot of respect for Downtime Trace and everything that you've done. I think it's a great application. And, I really encourage the listeners to go out, check it out, download the technology, look at it. And, if it makes sense for you, reach out to Danny. Definitely
Yeah.
can support you. And Danny, again, so much gratitude for you sharing your story today. Really appreciate it. And, definitely look forward to the next conversation. And to everyone else, take the steps that you need to do today to make a difference for your organization. And as always, it's those small micro steps that we take daily. They're going to have the big impact for us, our communities, our hospitals, and our patients. So with that, until next time, you can follow me on altiushcg.com and look for me on LinkedIn. It's Stephanie Dorwart, Dorwart, and Instagram as well as Facebook. Thanks a lot. Until next episode, I'll see you then.